Now we'll move on to part 2, dynamic stabilization in our series. So this exercise is going to strengthen the cervical extension and all of the supporting muscles around the neck to really make sure you can stay with your head centered over your body. So I'm going to have Peter stand nice and tall, put his hands behind his head, glide his chin forward, and then glide his chin back into that chin pack. He's putting some isometric tension here into his hands, breathing, holding for 8 seconds, feeling these muscles strengthen here, the ligaments relax, and all of this is going to actually turn into putty in his upper traps. He's going to glide forward again, create some isometric tension, chin back. Another variation is you can use a towel here and hold it behind your head if you want, but this is just the simplest way to do it. Always with breath. In this next exercise, I want you to pay particular attention to the cues I give to Peter and how I position his body. I see people doing this incorrectly all the time, and the difference between doing this the right way and the wrong way is going to make all the difference to the health of your shoulder in the long term. This is called the 90-90. Now you can see that we've placed a towel under Peter's head here, and that's to protect his head from flexing down and creating any tightness within that neck and cervical spine. I'm going to have him rotate his right arm as far as he can behind him and touch the ground. And Peter's doing a great job here. He's reaching high in line with his forehead. I see all the time people reaching down here, internally rotating the shoulder and not actually getting the opening of the shoulder that we're looking for. So reaching for the forehead is key here. The other thing he's done is you'll notice he's moved his eyes with his hand. So you want to look where you're going because cervical rotation and thoracic spine rotation go hand in hand. So always move that neck, move those eyes. Another important key here is that he's not over-rotating his lower back. His rotation is coming from his upper back. In fact, if I put my hand here on Peter's hip, you'll notice he's not putting any pressure into me at all. So he's able to fully rotate and separate rotation from his upper body to rotation from his lumbar spine, which we don't want. You don't want to torque and wrench that lower back. Fight the urge to separate the knees because that will give you artificial rotation through the lower back. Really squeeze and keep those knees tight through the whole movement. Now here is a great cheat if you can't quite reach the floor, because the last thing you want is to be reaching and struggling and reaching, because that's not going to relax anything in your body or open up any flexibility. So we're going to put this block under Peter's knees, and now you're a little bit elevated through the hip, so you're going to be able to rotate all the way because you're already a little bit rotated in that hip. It's going to feel a lot easier. If that still doesn't do the trick, I would just get whatever you have in the house, stack some books, rotate again, and press into that stack. The key here is you can't be just hanging out in space or it's not going to work. Always breathing again. And the last thing I want to show you is that if you have a partner or a buddy, you can actually open up the ribs and the serratus and the spiral line. So I'm going to have Peter reach, and I'm going to lock his hip here, and I'm going to help him rotate through the ribs, and you feel a great stretch there.
The best stretch ever. Because
I'm actually opening up the entire spiral complex that's impinging this movement, and then I'll help him rotate back. Now we're going to mobilize the internal rotation of the shoulder while protecting the lower back from moving. I'm going to have Peter get on all fours. He's going to rock back here where his hips are almost touching his ankles there. What this does is it posteriorly tilts the pelvis so it locks it into position. I'll have him walk his hands a little bit higher actually. You can see it's really important that his chest and shoulders are higher than his hip. Internally rotate the right arm behind his back. Now you're going to want to crank this on your own and see how high you can get and be a hero, but the higher you get, the more you'll start to impinge that shoulder. So only go to where you can keep that extension of the shoulder blade and not let it tilt forward. And then I'm going to have Peter lead again with his eyes, just like in the last exercise. Pull his shoulder back, squeeze that shoulder blade, take a breath, and then go back down. He's going to recheck, make sure he kept his hips low and his chest high. Lead with his eyes. Squeeze the shoulder blade. He's doing a great job of keeping that shoulder open. And now you'll be able to put on your backpack without tearing your shoulder. Now we're moving on to the all-important thoracic extension without cervical extension or flexion, so a nice neutral neck. I love this exercise, and the reason I love it is because you're getting some nice thoracic spine extension and mobility, but the arms are bent, so you're not impinging the AC joint by having the arms straight. So if you actually have any kind of shoulder problems with the AC joint right here, you can do this safely and still get some nice extension of your upper back. So I'm gonna have Peter put his elbows on this slat here. If you're in a gym, you can use a bench, you can use a couch at home, whatever you have to put your elbows on so your head is floating off. So if you've done a cat-cow pose in yoga, you'll be familiar with this, where I'm gonna have Peter actually go into extension. This is the cat part. But the key here is that he's not overextending his lower back or lumbar spine. His hinge point is in his mid-thoracic right here. He's gonna take a breath, then come up, protract the shoulder blades a little bit, and then go back down into that extension, focusing on getting the hinge from here. And you might not go that far. Don't create any false movement from here. It's fine to be a small movement, and in time, you'll increase that range of motion. Now, if we want to take this to the next level, and you have pretty open shoulders and scapula, you can actually put your hands behind you and cross them, and this will further stretch those lats, and you can even press into where your hinge point is. So now you have a little bit of feedback of where you're hinging from. Peter's also doing a nice job of keeping his neck neutral. He's not over flexing his chin. He's just keeping it nice and relaxed. Key point here is to not let the chin flex forward. You want to keep it centered over the body as you extend and flex that thoracic spine. This next exercise is a fantastic complement to the external rotation strengthener we did before. We're going to take that shoulder through the entire range of motion overhead.
Normally I like to do this with a really wide dowel to start, and over the course of my workout, because I usually do this in between sets of other exercises like squats or deadlifts, with progressive sets, my grip will come narrower and narrower and narrower. But for the purpose of this, we're just going to use a broomstick. It's actually a little narrower than I would like to start, but I think it gives you a chance to see the rotation. A couple of cues I think about when I'm doing this, and Jesse will point them out in detail as I'm doing it. One is I try to have a very relaxed grip. The second is I want to be slightly cupped inside, and Jesse I think will be able to point that out probably a little bit better when we go to a side angle. But I'll show you what this looks like from the front. So again, given that I'm limited by this broomstick, I'm going to grab it as wide as I possibly can, kind of a neutral stance. You can see I'm not standing bowl upright. I have this cupped position, which again will be more evident from the side. And with a very relaxed grip, I'm taking this thing up and around. And nowhere in there am I feeling any impingement in the AC joint. Nothing in this position hurts. In fact, this just feels like a wonderful movement. So if you're doing this and it hurts, you need to be going wider. So let's take a look at what this looks like from the side, and then Jesse will call out what he's cueing me to do.
First of all, that cup Peter talked about is in a great position here. It's almost the same activity you'd get in a really deep dead bug exercise where that transverse abdominis is fired up, making sure that extension doesn't come from the lumbar spine. But with this cup also, you'll notice Peter stays neutral here and doesn't flex forward like he just did, because if you cup too much, you're gonna have to work really hard to overcome that flexion of the upper back there. So we're gonna cup at the lower lumbar spine, nice and neutral here. I'll have him reach up. Watch this moment here, very important. His shoulder stays open the whole time. How do you know that you're basically doing this in a too challenging way and that your arms are too close? It's that you'll find this basically impinge forward. We'll show Peter do a really close one so you can see. This would be too close right here. He'll do a lot of things, move around, and you can see that shoulder come forward just a bit there, and he can't even make it here without probably bending forward or changing the architecture.
It's just the wrong position, and you'll know it when it's wrong.
So start wide, go slow, open up the extension all around that glenohumeral joint. To finish up the sequence and prepare us for loading, this is a great exercise to strengthen all the extensors we've worked already. We're using a stability ball for it because you can actually articulate the spine versus if you were on the floor, you'd be stuck in a fixed plane. So this is going to actually let Peter move through the facet joints of the spine. So we're going to have Peter lay down here. He's nice and relaxed with his neck. He's slightly over the ball with his chest, and the reason I'm doing that is because when he's slightly over the ball, he has to lift slightly with his chest, versus if the ball was all the way into his chest, he could just be very relaxed here. So again, you're slightly hanging over the edge here. The first move he's gonna make is bringing his arms this way into a W position. Now we're starting with the W because this is the least provocative on the shoulder complex, and everyone will be able to do this move. The biggest cue here is just making sure we're maintaining a 90-degree angle, and again, pinching that pencil between his shoulder blades here. The next move he's going to make is bringing his arms out into a T and then retracting again. You could see that he's fighting gravity here, so really he's working very, very hard, and this is close to loading, so that's why we put this at the end, because it's probably the most work you'll do in this whole sequence for actually strengthening and stabilizing this movement. The next is he's going to reach into a Y here with his arms forward, the third hardest of the exercises, and now he's really working on that extension overhead, again fighting gravity, making sure he's moving from his mid-back, not his traps or neck, so his shoulders are staying down. And the last move is straight into an I. This is the hardest and most provocative because the AC joint is working really hard to stabilize here, but it's also the best of them all in terms of getting the most range of motion out of the entire shoulder girdle.
Now, a lot of the exercises we talk about, including this one, can be done and should be done on a nearly daily basis, or certainly anytime you're about to exercise. But this exercise in particular, I find really important to incorporate at higher volume into workouts when I'm going through phases where I just feel like I don't have the stability or strength in my shoulder. So during periods of my life when I've been coming back from shoulder injuries, this is exactly the kind of workout I would do without a load, by the way, meaning I'm just using the weight of my arms and hands to do this as actually, say 10 sets of this throughout a workout. So in the way we're doing it here, where you might just progress through it once or twice, great way to prepare for load as we're about to do in the next sequence. But also don't forget that these are the kinds of exercises that you can do at a little bit more volume to actually increase the strength of the shoulder.